Okay, great. Thank you all for joining us. Welcome to the public sector breakout. It is wonderful to see all of you in 3D. If I haven't met you in 2D or 3D, my name is Jen Huppe. I run the public sector solutions consulting team. I'm biased, but I firmly believe the public sector is the best team at Appian, and we're going to have the most fun this week. So thank you for coming. We're going to have a great conversation today about customer experience, automation, low code, and I have two very special guests with me, Sonny, Hashmi, and Kyle Thomas. So I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves because you have very long and impressive titles, and I don't want to butcher them. I'd like to start.
Kyle, go for it.
Sure. Well, good morning. Kyle Thomas with the Conference of State Bank Supervisors. As we call it, is the nationwide trade association. Vice President of Business Strategy, so helping to kind of chart the path forward for automation of our existing platforms and as well as creating some new ones.
Great. Good morning. Oh, voice of God, right here. Good morning. I'm Sonny Hashmi. I'm the Commissioner for the Federal Acquisition Service, which is part of the General Services Administration. Essentially, we're the supply chain arm of the federal government. We are responsible for creating a marketplace that provides the right products and services to make them available to the government across the federal government and state and local in many cases for when it's needed. So I'm responsible for an organization that transacts somewhere around $85 billion worth of transactions every year, somewhere around 75 million products on our marketplace, and many tens of thousands of companies that we do business with. Ultimately, our goal is to create a marketplace that is not just make the right products and services available, but drives the right social policy agenda items from sustainability to a focus on small business enablement, and make sure that we continue to create experiences that make it a joy to do business with the government for companies as well as for our customers who transact through us. So be excited to be here. Thank you.
Great, thank you. To build off of what you just said about improving customer experiences, so our current administration has put out the CX executive order, which aims to improve customer experience and service delivery for the American people. So could you each talk a little bit more about your customer set? What are some of the challenges that you faced in serving your customer set and how you are improving customer experience?
Yeah, I can start with that. So my organization is very broad in the sense that we have many different customer bases that we're responsible for. So part of my organization is a technology transformation service that literally serves all Americans. So if you ever decide to go to get voting information on vote.gov, if you want to just get information on any federal government program through USA.gov, we are responsible for running those platforms. So literally, we are the front door to the federal government. So customer experience, citizen experience becomes a primary driver in that context. But even beyond that, for the many tens of thousands of companies that we work with, for the many hundreds of agencies that we transact with, customer experience is a mission-critical important area for us. Because ultimately, if the experience of working with the government is so frictionful that you decide to give up along the way, and ultimately that friction is going to disproportionately affect small and disadvantaged businesses because they don't have large teams and consultants to throw at the problem. We're not only going to miss out on great innovation along the way and competition in the marketplace, but we're also going to, we'll be unable to drive the right mission outcomes for our partners. So creating great experiences is not a nice to have for us. It's really the way to make sure that we're creating the most diverse, most inclusive, and most innovative marketplace for our customers. So one of the areas that we realize is that because we do so much in acquisition, it happens to be an area which is probably the least CX oriented in the entire federal government. Anybody who's dealt with federal procurement knows how complicated, convoluted, and frictionful that experience can be. I've worked in the private sector for many years. I'm firsthand experience in how difficult it is to do business with the GSA. And so one of the things that I'm trying to focus on in my tenure here is to make it delightful, not just better, but delightful to do business with the GSA, because that ultimately is going to drive more companies to choose to work with us that will drive more innovation and diversity in our marketplace, that will drive better solutions to our customers, and then the virtuous cycle will continue. So it's used to be that CX was kind of like a nice to have. Yeah, we'll put some efforts into it. Maybe it'll be a nice thing to do. Now it's absolutely mission critical that we get it right.
Absolutely.
And on the surface, it might seem like Sonny and my role and our organizations have nothing in common, but a lot of what Sonny just talked about, I think, translates very well into the financial services space, and particularly the work we're doing with customer experience. So like I mentioned earlier, we are the association. We support the state financial regulatory agencies out there who are really the beat cops in every one of your states, making sure that the people providing your financial services are doing so in accordance with the law and protecting you as the consumer. And so when we look at what it means to make that space more efficient, it comes to creating a more frictionless environment. Frictionless being, it's easy for a new company that wants to get a license to do business in your state to go get that license and start doing that business. So creating an intuitive application to handle that intake of information, the turnaround time for that company to get a license speeds up. That gets them to market quicker. It helps them be more innovative. It creates a more, I think, robust financial services market. So that's on the company side, who are ultimately kind of in our periphery of customers. On the agency side, the state regulatory agencies who are our direct members, they're the ones that have to turn around all this information and do the work of evaluating these applications, examining these companies, and making sure those companies aren't taking advantage of consumers. The faster and easier we make it to do that work, the healthier the financial services market becomes in the United States, which ultimately leads to better consumer protection. And that's what we really, really believe, is that by making the states more efficient, or any government agency more efficient, consumers are better served. And I think that's kind of the same message.
And how have you leveraged low-code tools like Appian to better serve your customers?
Yeah, we're knee deep in it. It's been really fun to see how quickly we've been able to turn around applications through Appian. We've got some internal applications, just some internal business processes that we've built out to get a start. And then we've taken some big steps forward and have some flagship systems out there. I'll speak to the one that I'm most familiar with. It's called the State Examination System, and it's a supervisory platform. It's kind of like an auditing platform. And 2 user bases, companies and regulatory agencies, and it's totally transformed the process. It was very paper-based before. So prior to our release of the system in 2019, or 2020, the old examination process was very much kind of paper-based, email-based, and a lot of exchange of very sensitive information through what could be often informal channels. And so we've heard a lot about process automation and taking a look at the data that allows you to identify the weak spots in a process. We didn't really need any of that because we could just see it very clearly where the inefficiencies were, and we just started tackling those in our first few releases. So we've moved all of that exchange of information between regulatory government agency and a private industry practitioner into the digital space. And now we can really start, this is why I'm so excited for the future, we can really start doing some cool stuff with the data we have and the documents that are flowing through our system. So that's just kind of a preview, I think, of what we're doing in the low-code space, but interested to hear something what you've got.
Yeah, I think we're probably behind in terms of our maturity, specifically with Appian, than you all are. So we're actually looking to you all as the example. GSA is using Appian in some of our really key business processes. So one of the sides of GSA, the agency I work for, is that we're the government's landlord. We manage 10,000 facilities, both owned and leased facilities. We're the largest real estate holder in the United States. And one of the ways that we do all of our lease processing, lease management of over 8,000 facilities all over the country is through Appian. Appian is a back-end platform for working with the private sector providers, lessors, and the government consumers, as well as those agencies that occupy that space to manage that entire end-to-end environment. It's been a very successful program. It's been going on for many years. We have more innovation that we need to add there. More recently, we're looking at new opportunities for leveraging the platform, and I think there's no shortage of them. One of the things that's become very clear to me, and I think anybody who's been around for the last few years, is that our world is changing faster than we can accommodate through traditional methods of technology deployment. We don't have the 3 to 5 years to, used to be back in the day, the policy environment used to be stable enough to say, you know what, we know what the policy is, we just need enough time to kind of build a system and automation on top of it, and then the policy will be stable for the next 10 to 15 years, and that is no longer the case. If you look at what's happening in the environment that we're living in, is that every month there's new crises that our industry partners are dealing with, everything from inflation to supply chain disruptions to foreign influence to cybersecurity challenges that are always evolving. And in order to adapt to those external challenges, we have to constantly update our policy frameworks around what is a good thing to buy and how do we buy it, how do we test for it. And so those policy changes then need to be implemented in processes that ultimately people follow. And so we have to leverage platforms that can get me constantly updated, constantly modernized, so that they reflect the latest iteration of our policy frameworks. And we don't have the luxury of saying we're going to just implement the system once and then 5 years later it's going to be pretty much the same environment. That's going to be changing every month. And so because of that new reality, we're looking at new platforms and new ways to enable that workflow that allow us to stay nimble and be able to adapt to changing environments around us. And that's where we're very interested in leveraging the platform even more broadly.
I think something you said there made me think of why Appian and low code has been such a godsend for us, is because if you think about the space that a state regulatory agency works in, it's not just the state regulation and policy that they have to concern themselves with, it's also the federal. So there are layers, right? And those layers change all the time. The CARES Act came out, which changed the way certain financial services were looked at. Each state has their own version of a legislature that comes out with new rules and regulations, and then those get implemented. And so if you build, the old way of building applications around all those policies became very, very heavy. And then when things changed, you had to bring in a whole team of developers, and you had to rewrite the whole thing, and 3 to 5 years later, you'd have a deployment, and then by then, everything changed again. And so with Appian, we have been able to engineer our solution to know where those policy changes are going to happen and give ourselves the keys to the car to just implement those policies. So when something new comes out, we don't need to bring in developers. We can just do it, and I'm not talking even internally. We don't have coding experts. We hire that out. But we just had them build us a way for us to put those policy changes into production in real time. It's a huge time and money saver for us.
Yeah, that's amazing that you've been able to leverage Appian to really keep up with all the changes that you guys need to make. What about automation? Are you currently using automation tools with Appian?
Yeah, so like I said, we're kind of in a crawl, walk, run journey right now. We had a very paper-based process before that was not automated. Across believe it or not, there are 64 different agencies out there at the state level, roughly, that do some aspect of supervising your financial services world. And there was no central place where all of their information was contained. Each state had their own. And so trying to find a way to automate that involved first centralizing it, bringing all that data and all that work into one platform so that then we could turn on automating tools and start looking for parts of the business process that could benefit from more automation. Just as an example of one area that we've automated, and I'm very proud of this in our system, the old way of auditing a company, you'd send the request and then the company would send a bunch of stuff back. And generating that request was just kind of take a Word document and email it to a company. They didn't really look at the Word document. They didn't really tailor it to the company. We've built in our application the process for the system to look at that company and then intelligently create that request list based on just what is needed that examination or that investigation. So no more one-size-fits-all, no more cookie-cutter type exams, much more tailored, and I think that just lends to the efficiency piece. But we're still in somewhere between crawling and walking phase. So I'm excited for all the tools that we learned about this morning, because I think we've got a long way to go before we're running.
What about you, Sonny? How are you looking at identifying projects that are ripe for automation?
Yeah, so broadly speaking, enterprises all over the place, whether it's government enterprises or elsewhere, are at this inflection point where there's going to be a harder and harder challenge to hire the right talent or hire enough talent to throw people at problem. right? We've actually been living in this for the last 10 years. Just many people haven't realized it yet. And so as the world of commerce that we live in, the world of policy and compliance that we live in becomes more and more complex, with the interest of driving the better outcomes for the American people, we are constantly challenged with the fact that we cannot throw enough people at the problem to solve those things. And so automation is the only way out of the challenge that we find ourselves. Unfortunately, being a government agency, we have a target-rich environment on where that could be applied, right? We have many processes that are still very paper-based, very human-driven. Human intervention is too high of a cost to allow these processes to scale. So I'll give an example. Like recently, over the last, I would say, 6 or 8 months or so, we've been dealing more and more acutely with this challenge of foreign influence in our supply chain. Our adversaries are using the products that we buy every day as a vector to get into our networks, to get intelligence on our assets. And these products are not traditional ITC products. They're not software and hardware that we use. So these are thermostats and air handlers and security cameras and so forth. And so it falls on us as kind of the supply chain arm of the government to kind of really understand this problem and fix it. And there's no solution to this. You can only make progress. But in order to kind of really start to tackle this problem, we need to have supply chain data from end to end, from OEM and even before OEM. What chipsets are they using? What firmware is going to that chipset? So you need to have this global view of every product. And you have 75 million products in a marketplace. You can't possibly have people with screwdrivers opening them up and understanding this stuff. And so it becomes a massive data problem, right? Where do you collect these sources of data? What are the third-party sources that you trust? Who are the OEMs that you want to partner with in a deeper way? And so this came to a head with drones. So as you know, the federal government uses drones for everything from surveillance to overseeing pipelines and all the way to obviously national security applications. But many of these drones are manufactured in foreign countries, and we don't have control over the firmware, the chipsets, and so forth. So we work with the Department of Defense to develop a new program where we can actually have visibility into the entire manufacturing supply chain of certain drone companies, and then we can trust that supply chain. But all of that becomes a data problem, right? So to your point, how do you bring that data together before you can actually start to apply intelligence into it? So because of the efforts that we've done over the last 8 months around things like drones and security cameras and other product categories, we've been able to identify 200,000 different products that are not in the best interest of the United States, but they were previously available on our marketplace, right? And so without any ill intent, an agency can go and buy one of these products, and it's not really trusted code, it's not trusted chipsets, the manufacturers and distributors are not trusted. And so we've been able to identify and triage these products so that we can increase the security and compliance of our overall supply chain. So that's just one example of where automation is the only solution to solving a massively complex scaled problem. But that's just one foray into this area. We need to do similar things around how do we develop an understanding of the sustainability and carbon emissions of our supply chain? How do we enable small businesses and where they're located, and how do we proactively reach out to them? Which businesses are actually not being successful once they become part of our marketplace, and what are the reasons why? All of these are data problems, and so we need to bring the right data sources together, develop the right intelligence around it, and then allow the right automation to proactively reach out, to be much more kind of personalized in our interaction with these companies and so forth. So I'm excited about the possibilities, and these are the kind of platforms that we need to be able to do all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So this morning we heard a bit about process mining. Have you thought about how to take advantage of process mining?
Absolutely. I mean, I was just riveted with some of the ideas that were shown. So we have a lot of applications. The challenge for us is going to be a lot of those processes are disconnected. Like to your point, a lot of those processes sit in people's inboxes and email attachments and paper that's going from desk to desk. So we have some work to do before we can even get to the point where we can start to really get a full picture of a process, but the possibilities are amazing.
Yeah, we see some opportunities already in process mining. We see, like anybody with a platform similar to ours, there's multiple steps and multiple players in a given workflow. And so what process mining is going to allow us to do is take a look at that and then figure out, is there an innovative solution or a way that we can automate a particular aspect of the workflow to take some work off a person's plate. And I think that becomes important for our members because state agencies, like any other government agency, are typically starved for resources. And so they've got to do more with less. There's constantly a movement to try to squeeze more efficiency out of any agency. And if we can take some of those old processes that were taking a lot of human intervention and just automate them, then those humans can go to the next level of kind of what is uniquely kind of the human role in this, which is understanding like the subjective aspects of financial supervision or whatever work they're doing. So I think the best example is, in our system we've had over 150,000 unique documents that have been exchanged between parties. Those documents contain the information that the regulatory agencies are looking at to determine if that company is in compliance or behaving the way they're supposed to be. A lot of that can be automated. So while as excited I am about process automation, intelligent document processing is even more exciting to me, because much of the work that we do is around documents, and if we can get even just started to intelligently process those documents, then systems can start flagging risk and start using kind of AI to identify areas where then the humans can come in and start focusing their energy. Because right now, with the millions and millions of loan contracts across this country, every time you buy a house or buy a car, there's no way a human being can review all those. There's no earthly way. And so what we're facing is this like sea of documents that there's risk in, but we can't make sense of that. And so I think intelligent document processing, AI, gives us the ability to start boiling all that down into like the 1,500 loan files across the country that might need a human being to kind of crack those open and look at and decide, is there really a problem here? Is this systemic? And then take the actions. But prior to that or without that, we just don't stand a chance. There's just not enough people in the world to do the kind of work that would be necessary to ensure that everything is perfectly safe and sound.
Yeah. I love that you brought that up. Intelligent document processing is something that's very exciting in the government with all the very document-heavy processes that we have to deal with. All right, I have one more question. It's a little bit more of a fun question for Sonny, but Kyle, you can weigh in too if you want. Can you talk a little bit about how your organization is looking at and addressing zero carbon initiatives?
Zero carbon initiatives?
Initiatives, yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge area of focus for us. I'll keep it brief. So GSA is kind of like, I call it the junk drawer of government, because we kind of do a little bit of everything. Like when you don't know where to put a function in government, you end up putting it in GSA. So we end up with a lot of different responsibilities that all have a sustainability impact. So I'll give you an example. So like I mentioned that we're the largest landlord in the government, in the world actually. We manage over 330 million square feet of rentable square footage. That's a huge consumer and influencer of energy across the United States. And so we have a commitment to go to net zero carbon for all of our public buildings by 2035. And that is both carbon capture, that's also influences how we actually procure energy from the private sector and make sure that we have the right expectations built into our contracts with utility companies. That's one half of GSA, and there's a lot of work going on there. In my space, we are actively working to modernize the federal fleet to go to a zero-emission fleet in the next 10 years. We're the largest fleet operator in the country, so that's about 400,000 vehicles that we need to go to either zero-emission based on electricity or other technologies. And then lastly, I mentioned we have 75 million products that are being bought and sold throughout the FAS enterprise, and we need to understand the carbon impact for that entire supply chain. And so these are not easy things to do. But I am thoroughly excited about starting to make movement in this space. The federal government has a huge wake, and we are not only a big procurer of energy as well as products that have big global impact on carbon emissions, but we can influence these things in a smart way. So most recently, just last week, we announced a new committee that we formed with private sector to understand the supply chain impact of carbon emissions or carbon emission impact of our supply chain, and start to take the right policy actions to improve it. So lots to come in this space. If you're interested in this space, happy to talk to you offline and get your thoughts as well.
Great. Anything you wanted to add?
Well, we don't have the muscle of the federal government, and so the movements we make are going to be, as far as decarbonizing, substantially less impactful than Sonny's. But certainly every little bit helps, right, in this challenge, and every person, every company's actions make a difference. I would say from our perspective, we're going to decarbonize, or we can make progress on this just by getting people out of their cars and helping them avoid traveling from A to B. So that was the old model of supervising financial services. literally teams of people driving out to these different companies or flying out to these different companies in bigger states. By moving everything into the digital space, we're avoiding all that travel. It also helps retain people. There's less turnover because they can be home more often, enjoying their life with their families or their friends. And so I think just the efficiencies that we gain through low code and automation just kind of in turn help us lend a hand to that overall laudable effort of decarbonizing.
Great. Is there anything I didn't ask that you wanted to say before we wrap up?
I just feel that this community has such amazing ideas of innovation. We can't wait to learn from you as we start our journey. So please don't be shy about reaching out. And if you have good ideas or products or demos you want to share, reach out to me directly. We'll set it up.
Yeah, likewise. I think we've got a lot of staff here. We're happy to share kind of our journey, a little bit more of our story, the partners that we've worked with to get us where we are, and yeah, reach out, make contact, and I think the kind of ideas build on themselves at a conference like this, now that we're back in person.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for joining. Thank you both for sharing your expertise. We are going to take a 5-minute break while we switch for sessions. But if you want to stay for the next public sector session, it will be with Jason Adolph and FDA. So we will be in here, but if you need to grab a drink or something, you're welcome to do that. And we also welcome any feedback. So you should see in the app an opportunity to rate the session and add any feedback. We love ideas and feedback, so please go in there and give us some. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.